Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And just a little bit of background on this. At Venture School, we typically have a session at the end of each cohort where we talk about what's available, what community services are out there, what type of some direction on legal thoughts, some direction on financing, some direction on how you get support. And so we didn't have a chance to do that. We had 42 teams go through the various cohorts this spring, and we just simply ran out of time. So we thought what we would do is try to put together a webinar that will turn into a podcast, and we'll just give this information so it's available throughout the time eternal, actually. So this is going to be segmented into three 30-minute segments. The first segment will deal with basically statewide and community resources that can help entrepreneurs get started. The second will be on legal issues, both business formation, business structure, and intellectual property. And the third will be a discussion about statewide accelerators and incubators that are available to entrepreneurs. So that we've got nowhere near an exhaustive list of all these things, but what we'd have are the cream of the crop. So I'm very happy. I'm going to start off by introducing our first segment, the community and statewide resources, and welcome Christina Moffett. Christina is a relatively new director of small business resources for the Greater Des Moines Partnership. She's also a tremendous entrepreneur in her own right, and even was formerly a director of the SBDC in the Des Moines, in the central Iowa area. So great deal of experience and just a wonderful human being as well. We have Ben McDougall. It's hard to put a single label on Ben, but he's an entrepreneur. You saw him plugging his Flightbright, but he's also been a principal of Jet Set Studio, which basically puts on gaming events all around North America. He is the kind of the person behind the Central Iowa 1 Million Cups. He's the main principal organizer there. And in his spare time, he has a full-time job that as marketing and innovation director for Drake Homes, which is a large home builder in Des Moines. Third is a guy that probably needs very little introduction, but it's John LaMarche. And John is a principal of VentureNet Iowa. And John is important to almost every entrepreneur because VentureNet and the great team there, they are really the gatekeepers, the people that help the state of Iowa decide who should be granted state funding. And that's important because the VentureNet puts them through a very rigorous but also very fair and diligent vetting process that includes a review of the project before panels, and then they make recommendations to the funding organization. So quite a team here. We got a wide variety of things. So I'm gonna let Christina start. So Christina, can you tell us maybe what's going on in Central Iowa and any other perspective you can give?
Sure, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. This is always one of my favorite parts is now that they made it through Venture School, what's actually next? What do I really do to get this off the ground and going? Or if I've already been going, what do I do next to make this expand? So here at the partnership, I just made the leap over here in January, and my focus really is on helping we're past the startup phase and moving on into getting you strong and keeping you going here in Des Moines. So I've actually launched a series called The Top 5 for Small Business. It's actually all those issues that we face once we're growing. So the issues can revolve around marketing, HR, IT. We have some legal sections on there. We have a section completely on negotiating a lease or renegotiating a lease if you're up for renewal. So it's very general classes that really apply across the board to many businesses. So that's what's going on here. We also have an interview series with female entrepreneurs on their journey called First Fridays, which we teamed up with the Women's Business Center to kind of make that larger than what it is. All walks of life, from technology to Main Street to music to art, all different types of female entrepreneurs. And then we're also working on a small business summit that will actually focus on workshops and keynotes, again, kind of keeping to those general issues that all businesses face. And we're hoping to have about 400 attendees on November 10th. So that's just the partnership. Mike will also touch on everything that's going on in Square One, which is part of the partnership later. So I will leave that piece to him. Other things that are also coming is a small to big business forum. So if any of the graduates are looking to get in front of big businesses and find out how they work, that session will be coming this fall. And then Mike and I are both working on capital for your business, everything from a loan to venture capitalists and what that looks like and how do you prepare to actually go ask for money. And then we also have our Look Local series promoting small businesses here in Iowa and talking about the shift to even moving 5% of your corporate dollars over to buying from a local company, the impact to the environment. So those are things all in the works. And then we also have some mentorship, leadership, and what I learned from failure series coming that will all come out within the next year or two, and then also selling online. So those are all in the pipeline here. So that's just the partnership. But I also want to talk briefly on SBDC, which is where he came from, because I've spoken to the venture school students previously about that. And that is a statewide program. It's in 15 regional offices. So no matter what 99 county they're in, they can actually reach out to a director. It is a free government service that will actually sit down and do one-on-one counseling with you from a specific topic, issue. The biggest thing I think that they do is the cash flows. They will actually help you with your cash flows for free, which a lot of times you need to pay for those. And they, again, pretty much touch on every industry as well. So they're more typically known for the Main Street portion of it. So previously, before I came over to the partnership, I would work with Mike on anything that involved VC, angel investing, and or technology. That's not an area that we're often known for. Which then Mike would work with VentureNet. So again, everybody here is working their hardest to collaborate in the area. A couple other resources I kind of wanted to throw out there just as a list for people is the DMAC Business Resource Center. DMAC has multiple campuses, so that is also available. They work on training programs for your company. So they're in almost every county as well. The Drake JPEX Center here also has a 2-day boot camp, which I know they just went through venture school, but if they're finding themselves putting this on the table for a while and they need a quick refresher program, that might be a great program for them to revisit since they also use the Lean Canvas model there. There is also the Women's Business Center, which I touched on briefly. The crazy thing is they're called Women's Business Center. They're statewide, but they don't always focus on women. They also help a lot of minorities, anything from business planning to one-on-one. A little bit slower pace. So even if you're working at rebuilding your credit, that's a great place to start with them. They also have a micro loan program there as well. Here in Des Moines, the Evelyn K. Davis Center also has a boot camp. So if you need to back up, pivot one more time and slow down a little bit, the Evelyn K. Davis boot camp actually gives you your money back at the end of the program if you complete it. And then a lot of the chambers here in the area I wanted to touch on briefly have great mentorship programs that they've all started. Ankeny, for example, has the Hub. Urbandale has a mentor-mentee program. They also have a great small business resource kind of collective area where they're working with businesses on that. That's up and running. Clive, I know, has a one-day session coming on small business resources. And then Gravitate, I know somebody's going to expand on that. I work a lot with Jeff and his team here as well, which is expanding to multiple locations. Score, if you're looking for a direct mentor, which I know the program already had a lot of, but if you're looking for more mentors. And then Cirrus, depending on if you're going into government work, great, fabulous resource through Iowa State, targeted small business. If you need to be connected with that, Jill Lippincott here and I work very closely on getting people through that process. They went through a lean process, so it's much quicker and much faster to get through. And then 1 Million Cups, I know Ben will hit on. And then there's multiple networking groups here in town, depending on what business they're going into, or if just their values and what they want to do in their community, they can get plugged in and have access to multiple mentors that will help them.
Wow. Great summary. You know, it's kind of interesting because when I first got into this business about 25 years ago, there were literally no support groups, no resources. Entrepreneurs were just on their own. So as you can see, that's from Central Iowa. Now, Christina, are those also available to statewide companies?
Yes, there are. So some of these are just local. Some of them are statewide, just depending on the organization. One of my main roles here in coming over to the partnership too was to start to keep track of a lot of these and what's going on, because coming from the SBDC, I never knew what everybody else was doing in the state. And my goal now is hopefully if somebody contacts me, I can help get them to the right resource instead of saying, well, I think they can do this, or I think this is coming up. So yeah, if somebody has questions, they can feel free to reach out to me and I can hopefully get them to the right spot or the right date on a course that's coming up.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ben, Thanks. What about you?
That sounds good, Greg. I appreciate the invitation, and it's fun to be able to share a few thoughts on kind of the community overall. Obviously, that was all sorts of things. I hope this is going to have a linked list associated to the video, because there was a lot of neat things that people can plug into. One specifically that you had asked me to talk about was 1 Million Cups. And, I think you can really think of this as kind of the doormat into the startup community. It's a welcoming, community where you're able to attend every Wednesday morning from 8 to 9:30 a.m. at the Science Center right in downtown Des Moines. I saw Tominski's on the line, and they have a great organization over there that goes in between Cedar Rapids and Iowa City each week. And then there's one more in Cedar Falls. So 1 Million Cups, there's 100 of them around the country. And Des Moines and Cedar Rapids were some of the first remote locations. So the format is super cool. It's interactive in the fact that entrepreneurs have an opportunity to share what they're building, 6 to 10 minute pitch. So really concise. And then it becomes an opportunity for the community to ask questions, provide feedback, and really at the core, accelerate others. And so whether that's attending to generate energy and meet others and learn from what others are building, or maybe when its time is right, being able to present on our stage and kind of coming away from the tree to really get a glimpse of the forest, as I know entrepreneurship can be somewhat of a lonely roller coaster. So 1MC is a really neat opportunity to meet other folks, to energize yourself midway through the week, every Wednesday morning. And it's been my favorite event for over 5 years. So it's easy to like. A couple other events that come to mind, I know EntreFest just got over, but some of the larger events, Accelerate DSM also just had another second year success. Des Moines Startup Drinks is another more localized example, but as you've heard, there's all sorts of different things that allow you to not only plug into a community, but also help build your own. And I think as entrepreneurs, community building can be really one of the key points to not only accelerate yourself, but to build kind of a network that is engaged. And a lot of us know the value of an engaged network when it comes to marketing and helping others, but also sharing what you're building as well.
Great. Thank you. You are a busy man. Okay, John, you want to give a rundown of kind of your role and the funding that might be available for some startups or early stage growth companies? Could you help us there?
Yes, I can help, and thank you for the introduction. It was very concise and kind of right on point in terms of what VentureNet does. Adrienne Greenwald has joined me, my colleague, and she'll correct me with impunity if I misstate something. One editorial comment, and everybody's really kind of weighed in on this point, but there's been this great proliferation of resources available to early stage entrepreneurs that, and we, represented here among several of the presenters as well as people who aren't here. But as a result, from our standpoint, we see companies that are so much better prepared. They understand what they need to do relative to the journey towards sustainability and success. So we see the bar has been raised. and people have really kind of stepped up to the plate, but really based on the support that they're getting from around the state. So a very good thing. And a lot of those resources weren't here 4 or 5 years ago, so there's been kind of an explosion in that regard. We're going to switch over to an exhibit which really shows what the state's programs are presently. Iowa has 4 programs that are really aimed at providing some assistance for people who are commercializing innovative technologies. And they run the gamut from companies that are at a very early stage. They have a demonstrable proof of their concept. They've got prototypes. They're looking at taking something through beta test or getting some very early customer feedback, validation in terms of their products, all the way down to companies that are well established in the marketplace and are looking for expansion capital. All of the state's programs are require a match from a private source, be it outside investors or a combination of those third-party equity investors, as well as potentially the founders of the companies. The state considers itself to be a follow-on investor and is really looking for validation from the private market for those programs. They're all set up as loan programs currently. The idea is that while there's continued appropriation on an annual basis, the idea is to build up an evergreen fund which, based on the success and repayment of the loans, increases that fund. The Economic Development Authority is not, of course, immune to the budget issues. So Debbie Durham has a single appropriation that really encompasses not only her operational budget, but also the programs that are supported by the state. So we will see what happens in the next fiscal year. I think it's probably safe to say that that at least, we think that these programs will be maybe not totally immune from that, but there should be adequate funds as we get into the year. Let's see there. The target is really innovative technology, so it runs the gamut there as well. So it could be IT, it could be value-added ag, advanced manufacturing, renewable resources, renewable fuels. So basically it's looking to support companies that have some kind of intellectual property, be it something that is supported by patents or trade secrets, or in the case of IT products, typically while there's not a strategy for protecting algorithms and so on, it's really about then speed to market. We have again, we're seeing companies that have come through this pipeline that are better prepared than they were previously. And as Greg had pointed out, we do rely in our evaluation, our high-level SWOT analysis, we really rely upon people who have expertise in the various technologies and markets. We have attorneys who are IP attorneys and people who've done finance, and a good number of those folks that we draw upon in terms of their expertise really have been in the entrepreneurial world as well. So they bring that perspective in terms of their evaluation of the opportunity, which really lays the foundation for the decision makers relative to the state funds. So the VentureNet process, while the people who serve on the focus groups make a recommendation in terms of the company's readiness to take the next step, the decision makers are really a standing committee, a subcommittee of the Economic Development Authority Board of Directors, which consists of people who are representing the various industries and are entrepreneurs and business people, and they essentially make the recommendation, which becomes, in almost all cases, the de facto decision relative to funding a particular opportunity. Adrian, what have I left out?
I think you've covered it.
Yeah, I haven't stumbled totally?
No.
Okay. This matrix here that you see represents a snapshot of the various programs. There has been a few changes and really reflective of the good work that's being done around the state. So the bar is a little higher relative to companies that are looking at the Proof of Commercial Relevance program. Think of it as a functional prototype versus an MVP. Those are terms of art. I think that, and I know Greg in the last venture school spent a lot of time really kind of differentiating in terms of the difference between an MVP and a functional prototype. But our rule of thumb is it's somewhat subjective, but we're looking for something relative to, if it's a tech product, for instance, so we're looking for something more than wireframes. There has to be something from a functionality standpoint. There has to be a back end as well as some kind of user interface. If it's a physical product, there has to be some representation that may not be ready for prime time or ready to take to the market, but to get customer feedback and maybe kind of slouching towards your beta test, I guess is what we would say, but something that demonstrates that the engineering is there and that it's able to look at customer discovery aspects and to get that kind of feedback, but something substantive in that regard. So beyond an idea for which somebody's got an MVP, the bar has been raised to look at something that's a little more functional. And again, that's a subjective question. And if there are questions from anyone who's pursuing that, I think they should feel free to contact us and we can hopefully provide some guidance along that point.
So, John, just a real quick question. How many of these investments do you think will be made this year in the various categories? I assume the proof of commercial relevance is the most prevalent.
That's correct, Greg. Think of it as a funnel in which there are certainly more at the front end, and as companies work their way down that funnel, there's certainly fewer companies. Last year there were, I believe, 2 Propel Awards only. In 2016, we had 92 applications. Now, some of those applications, a good number of them were companies that were really not looking for public funding and just wanted to have a focus group to get feedback on either their business commercialization model or some aspect of it. And this year, we're actually, I think, seeing less in terms of that. And we don't know where we're going to end up. It's somewhat variable. It's kind of like that box of chocolates. You just don't know what you're going to get. In fact, in this case, it's until you open the box, you don't know how many chocolates are in there. So we're seeing, and it's really variable. So in terms of that crystal ball relative to the number of awards, we would say somewhere around 60% of the applicants that we see, maybe slightly more than that, 62% or so, on a historical basis have been funded by the state. And sometimes companies come through the process and they may be denied for some rationale or some reason, and they can come back. There's no real penalty, and often when they do so, they typically address the issues that were outstanding and often will get funded.
Okay, great. Any questions of any of the 3 presenters from any of the people that are entrepreneurs that are tuned in, or anyone else? I'll just make a quick comment. Christina mentioned that they are developing programs for women entrepreneurs, and it was with a great deal of pleasure that I saw that the Women's Investment Network in Des Moines just made their first investment of a woman-owned company. And so everybody knows that in entrepreneurial world that women tend to be underrepresented. So as the father of 2 very entrepreneurial daughters, I'm glad to see the emphasis being changed. Anything else? We're just about out of time for this segment. Anybody? Last chance. Okay, I want to thank the 3 presenters, Christina, Ben, John, Adrian. And you're free to go, and we'll get started with the legal discussion here. So with that, I'm going to introduce our 2 attorneys who have joined in today. They are both from Shuttleworth and Ingersoll. Bye, Ben. They're both from Shuttleworth and Ingersoll, which is just a great law firm in Cedar Rapids, long-standing and highly regarded. Bill Daly is going to talk a little bit about startup and structure and organization. And he has great resume, BA in finance from UNI, and then both a master's and a JD from the University of Iowa. So we know that he's smart. Jason, I assume you're smart too, but Jason Sitzma specializes in intellectual property and information technology. So, and he comes by that naturally. He has a bachelor's in electrical engineering from Iowa State and a JD from New Hampshire School of Law. So, these are the two issues that typically entrepreneurs face, and that is, how do you really go from being, a few people that get together to talk about something to having a structured business company with a legal structure and legal protections in there, but also how do you protect the intellectual property, that special sauce that makes your company special and competitive in the marketplace. So with that, I'll let Bill and Jason take over.
Thank you, Greg. All right, I'm going to share the screen, so bear with us for a couple seconds here. And I think if I do it this way, I think it works. We'll see. All right, can everyone see that?
You bet.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Greg. This is Jason Sitzma, so everybody with the faces with the voices. Me and Bill chair our firm's Startup and Innovators Practice Group. So we both have a lot of experience working with startups and entrepreneurs. It's something that we both very much like doing, and so we're pleased to do and participate in events like this. So again, thank you, Greg. I want to first start off, I think what we heard, John say, was worth the price of admission. He mentioned a lot of about the importance of intellectual property, at least as far as, when the state is looking at investing in funds. And, it's important to not overlook the property portion of that phrase, because it is an asset. It can be a valuable asset of the company, and it can be valued. So what we're going to talk about here is steps that you can take, or steps that your company can take to create some value for your company. We got it on the, all right, there we go. So when we talk about intellectual property, we're generally talking about 4 different subject areas: patents, trade secrets, copyrights, and trademarks. They're each independent types of intellectual property. They can have some relationship to each other, but it's important not to mix them up, because they're each different types of intellectual property. They have their own separate rules. They're valued differently, and they're regarded differently by the courts. So when we talk about patents or trade secrets, they're really, in some sense, they're opposite sides of the coin. When you have something that you think is inventive, that nobody else in the world has done before, that's going to give your company some value, one of the first things you should be thinking about is this something that I want to patent? Or do I get more value out of this idea, this invention, by keeping it a secret? And some of the things that you might think about are, how easy is my invention to reverse engineer? If it's incredibly difficult, maybe it's an internal manufacturing process, maybe it's a chemical process, something along that line, you might be leaning towards trade secret. On the other hand, if it's easily reverse engineerable, if it's a product that's going to be out in the public domain for your competitors or potential competitors to look at, take apart, and examine, then you might be thinking about a patent. Certainly something else that comes into play in there is, what kind of patent can I get on it? If it's something that is truly unique and new to the market space, maybe I can get a broader patent with a more scope of protection. But if it's something like a small improvement to something that others have done before, maybe the patent is going to be small, and so you might think to yourself, well, maybe that's something that maybe instead of pursuing a patent, I might be better off keeping a trade secret. So there's a lot of things that go into that are worth thinking about, and certainly that's something that your attorney can help you walk through. I can flip through this way. But so I want to get into now to what is a trade secret in a patent. I'm going to ask you to find that. A trade secret is really broad. Basically, it's anything of economic value that's subject to secrecy. So if it's something that has value for your company and you can keep it secret, then you potentially have a trade secret. I would add to that, though, is keeping something a secret is really difficult, especially when you have partners, employees, vendors, customers. It's difficult to keep information a secret. But if you can do that and keep it a secret, then you have a piece of economic value. I'll throw out a good example is the Google searching algorithm. They didn't patent that, or at least the first iteration of that. That's something that they've kept internally as a trade secret. And I'd suggest that that's got a tremendous amount of value. The next side is to that coin then is a patent. And so say you decide you do want to go to the patent route, or you at least want to consider the patent route. It's important to understand what a patent is. What does it give you? Well, a patent doesn't give you a right to manufacture a product. You don't need a patent to manufacture or sell a product, and it doesn't give you the right to manufacture or sell a product. What it does give you is the right to exclude others from practicing the invention as claimed in the patent. And that's a very important distinction, because what the significance of that is that you can have a patent, but you may not be able to sell your product if it infringes somebody else's patent. So it is possible that you have something that meets the standards of patentability and is patentable, and indeed you get a patent on it. But by the virtue of selling your product or making your product, you're infringing somebody else's patent. So that's an important distinction or important characterization of a patent, is that it's the right to exclude, not the right to sell or manufacture. So there's a few things that we've got to look at in order to determine whether or not you're entitled to a patent. And it's got to meet generally overcome three hurdles. The first is it has to be proper subject matter. This used to not be a big area, but in the past 6 or 7 years, it's become a very tough hurdle in some types of technology, especially if you're in the computer software or life sciences industry. Overcoming that subject matter eligibility can be quite difficult. If you're able to overcome that, then the next hurdle is it has to be novel. It has to be new. And when we say new, it has to meet this standard. Nobody anywhere in the world at any time has ever done anything like what you're doing. So that's judged in light of what other people in the entire world have done. Assuming you're able to overcome that hurdle, the next one is it has to be a non-obvious improvement over what anybody anywhere in the world has done at any time. Now, and then finally, it has to be useful. That is it is a requirement, but that is a fairly simple one to overcome. Useful doesn't necessarily mean it has to be better than what's come before. It's kind of subjective. It can be maybe it's not less expensive, but it has some certain advantage. Well, then you're able to meet that usefulness prong. This is important for inventors, especially if you're going to form a company or if you're going to partner with independent contractors. You have to think about, well, who owns the invention? If somebody comes up with an invention, who owns it? Well, inventorship always begins with the inventor. That's where it starts. To the extent a company has rights to an invention for something that's developed by an employee or an independent contractor, that has to be done by some kind of agreement. So that means if you hire an independent contractor to help you come up with something, solve a particular problem, you're going to need an agreement with that contractor to have the patent rights to that invention. Same thing goes for your employees. absent some agreement to the contrary, the employee owns their patent rights, not the employer. So it's really important to have agreements with your employees. Generally, what we like to do is have an agreement when they're hired, where that requires them to assign all of their rights to any inventions that they come up with to the company. So moving on from patents, we're going to talk about a little bit about copyrights. That's another form, a distinct form of intellectual property. And the copyright statute sets forth particular types of works that are eligible for copyright protection. A lot of them you're pretty familiar with, but if you're new to this area, you may not know that your source code or your output, database tables and compilations, that's all copyrightable as a literary work. There's two aspects to copyright law. There's first rights. The rights are your copyrights that come purely based on creation. We call that when it's created and fixed in a tangible form. And that means the work of authorship, or your rights or the copyrights, belong to you as soon as you create them. The second type, or the way to enhance that protection, is by taking the additional step of federally registering your copyright. There's some advantages to federally registering your copyright. It's a requirement to sue somebody for infringement. And you can also be eligible for statutory damages and attorney's fees for infringement. The nice thing about that is that you don't have to prove that you were damaged by the infringement. All you have to do is prove that the other party infringed your copyright, and you can get a statutory recovery that goes up to $250,000 per infringement. And finally, what I noticed is that it's pretty cheap to do compared to other types of intellectual property, federally registering your copyright. Finally, we have trademarks. And I would suggest that every company is going to have some trademarks. You're going to have your business name. That's going to be the name under which you sell goods or services. Maybe your product is going to have a particular name. Maybe you're going to have a tagline for your business. Maybe you're going to use a particular color scheme or some other indication to identify your company with a particular product or service. Generally, as my slide says, anything that's capable of serving as a source indicator can be a trademark. We have color trademarks. We have sound trademarks. And then we have your just general words or logos as trademarks. And I'm running just about out of time, and I want to leave a few minutes for questions. But when we're looking at trademarks, I could try to, we evaluate trademarks on this spectrum based on their strength. On the very low end, that's not shown on this screen, is a generic name. There's no protection for a generic name. You can't get the trademark for beer to sell beer. One level up from that is a descriptive mark. I like to think of the term shredded wheat. Shredded wheat describes the good or service that's actually in the box. So we call that a descriptive mark. And that's a little more difficult to register. You have to have secondary meaning, and that's usually acquired through sales. Above that, we go up to suggestive, then to arbitrary, and then completely made up names. The trademark law is designed to protect made up and arbitrary names the most. So when you're thinking about that, think of Apple for computers. That is a completely arbitrary name associated with a product. That is a strong trademark. A made up name would be like Exxon or Kodak. Those are made up names. Those are also incredibly strong trademarks. So we always like to try to convince people to come up with an arbitrary or made up name. I know that that's kind of maybe some advice that you might not get if you're talking to a marketing person. They tend to suggest that people go with a name that consumers can more readily identify with a particular product. The problem with that is those types of names tend to be more suggestive or descriptive even. And then finally, I'm just going to end with this. If you have a trademark, before it's registered, you can put the TM or SM symbol on it. But once it's federally registered, you can get the R and a circle on it. The benefits of federal registration is you get a presumption of nationwide right to use that mark. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill.
I don't know where we are for participants. If there's anyone that has questions, they can ask Jason. Or is there anyone? Greg, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
I think, Greg, I can see your lips moving.
I'm sorry, it happens all the time. Let's go ahead and push on.
Okay.
And then we'll talk at the end.
All right, so I will move. I'm the corporate guy. I do entity formation, equity, debt finance, and then up through M&A. And as Jason said, we work with lots of startups, anywhere from the University of Iowa to Iowa Startup Accelerator, to then also just local, regional, and nationwide entities that are looking to kind of scale and grow. So types of entities. All right, so you'll see there can be a wide range of entities. A sole proprietor, which I'll talk about today, is really not an entity. It's pretty much, for lack of a better term, a person just operating a business. We'll talk about corporations, and then LLCs, or limited liability companies. The other forms that I just mentioned, though, are general partnerships, limited partnerships, and then LLPs, limited liability partnerships. Those are entities, but you generally don't see those with operating companies, the companies that are selling a good or a service. 99% of any company I see coming in are either LLC or corporation. All right, so new client comes in, and as Jason and I talk to them, we ask questions, we find out more information about them, things that I'm looking for from them to kind of pull from them, and just try to figure out info to help me guide them and decide what's the best entity. Things I look at is like ownership structure. Are there multiple owners? If there are multiple owners, are they all involved in the business? The facts and circumstances are very different if you have two people who are operating the business, have the know-how and the knowledge, but they're getting funding from one other person. That one other person they have a full-time job or they do something else, don't want to be actively engaged, but want, let's say, a third of the ownership or whatever that is. The issues presented in that situation is very different than, or somewhat different than, if there's three owners and all three are actively engaged in the company. Next question is, who are the owners? Are there going to be entity investors? Where are they located? Things of that nature. Where that comes into is it starts precluding whether or not they can be S corps and how they are taxed. Will the founders be granting equity to employees or other parties as compensation for services provided? It's very common in certain cases at early stage companies that they will grant equity to maybe that person who's building out their application, or maybe their first few lead salespeople that are doing to lure them or to attract them, because they probably can't pay a market wage or salary for what they're going to be doing from a larger company. They offer them equity to give them a piece of the pie going forward. And then whether it be different classes of owners or with preferred treatment. And again, that more gears towards the S Corp election, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But if certain things are yes or no, it goes down a different path of how they're going to be formed and what type of entity they're going to be. Along the line, we look at future growth. How quickly do they want to scale? Or are they, the structure of a high-tech startup or a scalable SaaS business or whatever that is different, and their issues or the way that they might be structured is completely different than someone who says, we have 3 or 4 owners, we want to be a successful small business here locally or regionally or statewide. We don't really want to take outside investment. We want to grow, be profitable, hire some employees, and pay ourselves a good wage and be successful. But we don't want to go and be the next Workiva. We don't want to go public. We want to be a 5 to 10 person company that provides a good living for our employees and for ourselves. And the way that they are structured may be different. Similarly, equity investment goes along the same lines. If they're going to be equity investment and they say we want to go raise money right away, how they're going to be structured is different. LLC versus a corporation will be a distinction or discussion I will have with them. Mostly, if you see they're going to do equity investment pretty quick, they want to take investment from outside of Iowa fairly quick or fairly soon. The discussion with them not being an LLC may be pretty a real conversation to have. And then lastly, will they be seeking debt investments, and just kind of walking through that. Taxation will go through that, but understanding the distinction between pass-through versus double taxation and taxation at the entity level. And then talking through what their initial capital contribution is. Are they just putting in, kind of transferring the IP, as Jason talked about, and maybe making a minimal cash contribution? But the situation I talked about earlier, where you have maybe two that are doing the know-how and one doing the cash, understanding how to structure that or to account for that, so then all three parties feel like they are being treated fairly and accurately to what their contributions are. And then lastly, whether or not they're going to have employees, and just walking through that with them. So as I mentioned, a sole proprietorship is literally, it's not an entity. There's no formal documents filed. They may file a trade name so they can, put the world on notice that they're operating as a business, but there is no limited liability. They have unlimited liability for their personal assets. There's no liability shield. They're the owner, the manager, they're the sole proprietor. Taxation is their tax on their personal income tax on the Schedule C. And when they come in, I generally I push people not to be sole proprietors because it's pretty efficient and cost effective to at least be a single member LLC anymore, or at least a single owner corporation, depending what they do, that there's the ability to get liability protection. Corporations. So we're going to be talking about corporations versus LLC. So a corporation, and I probably form as many Iowa as I do actually Delaware as well. And the distinction there is often if you are a scalable tech company startup, oftentimes you will form as a Delaware corporation, or if you don't, you may in a later, as you grow and take investment, especially if your investments from outside the state, may be required to convert or become or merge into a Delaware corp. One caveat there is that we're talking about what John Lamarche earlier with this funds from the state of Iowa is, if you want to take funds, and John can follow up on this if he's still on, or the questions, but I think the rules are you have to be principal headquarters in Iowa, and there's a couple of different qualifiers there, and I believe you have to be qualified or registered to do business in Iowa. So oftentimes we have clients that are Delaware C Corps qualified to do business in Iowa, and then their home office or their principal place of business is in Iowa, and they're still qualified for those funds from the state of Iowa and the IADA. So corporations, the document is you file an Articles of Incorporation, which is an Iowa document, or if you're in Delaware, Certificate of Incorporation. You have bylaws. The bylaws are kind of the discussion about the voting, what it takes to have a voting of the shareholders, and also the voting of the directors, what it takes to approve certain actions. And then also there's a shareholder agreement. The shareholder agreement is only applicable if there's multiple owners. And in the shareholder agreement is where the buy-sell provisions are. So if you have multiple owners, generally, if you go into business with someone, if Jason and I go into business together, he went into business with me, I went into business with him. If I wanted to sell my half of the business to David Tominski, David's there, I got to wake him up. Halfway through, Jason would say, I didn't want to go into business with David. I went into business with Bill. I know the assets and the value that he brings to the company. I don't know what David does. So a lot of times you have transfer restrictions in there to handle this. And most of the time you'll see a right of first refusal. Sometimes you'll see just an outright barring on transfer. I generally don't do that, but there's ways to handle that. There's also ways to handle it, if there's death or disability, ways to handle it if you sell the company and certain people say no. You also want to handle how voting will go if there's multiple owners, and you want to make sure everyone votes for themselves or each other for directors or managers. So all of that is in the shareholder agreement. For a corporation, if you are still a C Corp, I say that a C Corp is more for taxation purposes versus an S Corp, but there's double taxation, meaning the corporation pays taxes on all income they earn, and then when they dividend out or distribute to their shareholders, the owners, those shareholders and owners then pay taxation as well. So there's two layers. Liability, general rule is shareholders' liability is capped at their contribution to the company, barring bad acts or, things of breaching the shield. So the easy way to think about it is if you buy a share of Microsoft or Apple, what if they go under and they get sued and they lose everything, they're worth zero. The most you are personally liable for is what you bought that share for in Microsoft or Apple. And then they're managed by the directors and officers. So the way it works is the shareholders, who are the equity owners, they elect the directors. The directors then appoint the officers, and then the officers run the day-to-day operations of the business. Like I said, it's very basic, but that's just the ABCs of that. So S-election for corporations is a mechanism for them to have pass-through taxation. It is a favorable treatment, so then if you make $100, you don't pay that tax at the corporation and then have to then also pay a tax at the shareholder. So if you make $100 and you have an S-election, that $100 passes through, and again, the example would be if Jason and I own 50-50, we then have to account for $50 of income. And I'm simplifying this because there's other things involved, but that's the simple part of that. Rather than the company paying, let's just say, a 30% tax, and then Jason and I only getting $35 each distributed to us and then having to pay tax on that. The strings attached to be able to make an S-election it's the limits. You have to be U.S. citizen or resident. It can't have to be an individual. They allow certain trusts. You have to be a qualified trust. You can't have more than 100 shareholders. You can only have more than one class of stock. So the situation earlier when I talked about asking if they're going to issue preferred stock, it comes to this. Similarly, I was going to ask if they are entity investors or entity owners. It again comes to ruling out S-corp treatment. All right, LLCs. LLCs are a relatively new creature, I guess, of law. They are looking at it from like a formalities. They look at it like a corporation, but they're taxed as a partnership. The default treatment is partnership. However, there is, and it's getting probably more and more popular, that LLCs check the box and elect to be taxed as an S-corp. There's pros and cons, and I walk through that with the clients, but just knowing that that's an option is important. So entity documents, I made this similar to what the corporations look like, are you have a certificate of organization or formation depending on the state. With corporations, you have articles of incorporation. Here you have an operating agreement. Generally, my form operating agreement is I build the buy-sell provisions into the operating agreement, and then it also handles the voting and the direction about, the members here are the owners. So in a corporation, you have a shareholder who is the owner, and an LLC, you have a member. I generally default to having manager-managed LLCs. So think about it this way. The members elect the managers, just like the shareholders elect the directors. And then the managers will generally appoint officers. So the legal, like the nitty-gritty into the weeds is different, how they're treated. But if you look at it and how, like, who wears what hat, they do kind of look like a corporation in certain cases. Now, the legal treatment and our clients need to understand that is different, but at least from looking at it from appearance-wise, they can at least understand it by understanding corporate law as well. Liability, again, it's limited liabilities, just like it was in corporations. The one thing I will say, and I kind of talked about this, is if I have, it's all facts and circumstances when someone comes in. If it's a team of one, if it's a one person that has an idea and wants to get the IP in the company, doesn't know if they're going to be profitable for many years, where I'm looking at is probably a single member LLC. It's a default thing, a way to get an entity organized, get that going, get them thinking about how when they hire contractors or they hire employees or they engage with third parties and contracts, they're entering into with an LLC. They're protecting themselves that way. Also, they're putting the IP into the company, and they're starting to follow the kind of corporate formalities and understanding that they're not just a sole proprietor. Vice versa, if it's a company that says, yes, we have the next Facebook or whatever that is software product, and we think we're going to raise money right away or whatever that is, then the discussion is, when does that come in? How much money are you putting in now? Are you going to be profitable pretty soon? And looking at, LLC, and then whether it's an Iowa LLC or somewhere Delaware LLC, are they looking at an Iowa corporation with an S corp, or are they looking at a Delaware corp? So the discussion is, trying to find the trail and do the the funnel into what type of entity is the best. And it's all facts and circumstances. It's what makes best sense for them and what their budget is. And I think Jason would echo the same thing, is, everyone's different. They have a finite amount of funds of where they can allocate. And I think part of our role is helping them manage that the best way possible, minimize risk, and let them just make educated legal decisions about their business. So there's post-org issues like this and new entities need to understand is you have to get an EIN for Internal Revenue Service that helps you get a bank account. Also, it's kind of, for lack of a better term, it's the social security number for the company. Following corporate formalities, like I said before, you conduct business as an entity, you enter into contracts with the entity, you sign contracts as the officer or whatever your manager or whatever your title is of that entity. You write checks from the bank account, not your personal bank account. And you maintain a applicable corporate record book. Raising capital, one thing I always just make sure is when people sell interest in their company, whether it's an LLC or a corporation, that is a security. Whether it's a membership interest, an LLC unit, or a share of stock, that's a security, and making sure you're following applicable securities laws is important. Transferring my IP from the owners to the company, and similarly, as Jason mentioned, contractors or employees, they need to understand that, because, as Jason mentioned, that in most cases, if you're a software startup or a tech startup or a company, your IP is your main property. Attaining applicable licenses and permits, and then handling employment personnel and independent contractor issues. Understanding the distinction between an employee and a contractor is very important, and the ramifications can be pretty different. And I am not going to talk about that. So we are done in probably a half an hour, I think.
Right. Any questions from anyone on the call?
Is everyone still awake?
Yes. Yes, we all are. So I guess, Jason, if you could give us just real briefly a timeline and a cost for filing a patent, and maybe talk a little bit about a provisional patent versus a full patent.
Sure.
That always seems to come up, but just real briefly.
Yep. Yeah. But, the cost of preparing and filing a patent application is purely based in a large part on the complexity of the technology. A simple mechanical invention might cost $6,000 or so to get the application on file. Complex medical device, you might be looking at $16,000 to get your application on file. So there's certainly a considerable variation in cost. Now, you mentioned the provisional patent application, and that is a good option for startups and entrepreneurs to consider. A provisional application is never examined. It'll never turn into a patent. But what it does is it gives you a filing date for the subject matter that you've disclosed in the provisional patent application. So there's certainly there's some big advantages to doing a provisional, and there's some disadvantages to doing a provisional. The advantage is because it's not examined. It doesn't have the formal requirements of a regular patent application. One of the big requirements is you don't have to have claims, and that's the legal description of your invention. We, in certain instances, we filed provisional patent applications based on PowerPoint slides because it was very critical that we got a filing date in response to a public disclosure that occurred the day before. So a provisional application can allow you to do that, is get something filed right away. The downside for a provisional is that it only covers what's disclosed. And so one of the concerns is if we hurry through something, because we got to meet a filing date, you're not taking the time to describe as thoroughly as you might otherwise, the full scope of the invention. But that said, there's certainly a lot of advantages to doing a provisional patent application. It can usually be done for less money, especially if you have some time to prepare it. You might just draft one claim to give you an idea of where you're going, and then just spend some time on the disclosure. If the inventor is also at the same time working on some published research, well, that's a good opportunity to incorporate that published, that research that's going to be published into that provisional patent application. But if you're going to do the provisional, it can often be done for less money. On the low end, if the inventor just does most of the work, for some kind of simple mechanical invention or simple technology, you might be looking at in the low $1,000, $1,000 or so range.
Okay.
On the other hand, you might be spending more if you want to be more thorough on that provisional.
Right. Okay. We do have a question from one of the participants. It's from Brandon, and he says, for LLCs, is the designation operating member something laid out in the operating agreement or elsewhere? And is that designation a requirement to receive guaranteed payments?
All right. So by nature, LLCs are there's default rules underneath the Iowa Code for LLCs about operating agreements, and you can have oral operating agreements. The LLCs and the rights given are mostly a creature of contract. So a designation operating member would most likely be designated in the operating agreement. That's not like a standard usage, I would say, but it gets to the whole if someone's actively doing stuff. Is that designation a requirement to receive guaranteed payments? So guaranteed payments are a tax term, for lack of a better term. The general default rule is allocation of profits and losses follow what the ownership is or the membership interest for LLCs. Guaranteed payments are generally payments that are paid before the allocation of profits and losses. And I generally have it that the managers determine who the guaranteed payments go to. So the answer is operating member is laid out in the operating agreement, because if you want to have a defined term, it would have to be a creature of that operating agreement. And is the designation a requirement to receive guaranteed payments? No. I think you can get there however you do it. I mean, the managers can decide who they want to give guaranteed payments to, or essentially a salary.
Okay.
So.
And Brandon, if you have more questions, you might want to follow up with Bill on that, because we need to move on. So thank you very much, Bill and Jason. That's good stuff. And there's obviously, this was just a high-level review, and there's a lot of things that go into that, to all the topics that they've been discussing. So it's always better to seek wise counsel and legal counsel sooner rather than later before you get into a problem. So thank you both.
So Greg, the only thing I would say to that, just so you know, is we a lot of times will meet with entrepreneurs half hour just to walk through stuff with them. Don't charge them, and just want to answer those initial questions, because we'd rather have them make educated legal decisions rather than doing stuff that ultimately they pay more for down the line.
Right, and that's a great service that you guys provide.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to end up with the third. We're going to talk about accelerators and incubators that are available. We have around Iowa, we have 3 participants, 3 speakers. David Tominski is from Nuboco in Cedar Rapids, managing director of the Iowa Startup Accelerator, which is getting a lot of publicity over the last few years, growing. And he is well known around the state as both a passionate entrepreneur and a strong advocate for innovation and entrepreneurship. Julie Zielinski is with the Entrepreneurial Development Center, the EDC in Cedar Rapids. And EDC, she's Vice President of Marketing and Strategy, but EDC is basically a community-based community-based accelerator and assistance program that they take people into the program, work with them to strengthen not only the business plan, but also their management skills. And Mike Colwell is here. He's the Executive Director of Entrepreneurial Initiatives at Square One Des Moines with DSM, which is basically, again, it's an on-premise accelerator that is making a lot of headlines. They got great programming. And all 3 of these individuals are very well known around the state, strong advocates for innovation and entrepreneurship, and we're very happy that they're here today. So David, we've got 23 minutes left, so if we can limit this to maybe 5-6 minutes each, that'd be great.
Yeah, good. You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Can you actually see me? I hid myself, so as long as you can, I don't know if you actually want to see me.
We can see you.
We love you, David. We want to see you.
All right, I appreciate that. I feel the love all the way over here in Cedar Rapids. So thanks for sending it. So I won't take too long, but I think for the purpose of this, as we're talking about venture school and the way it connects with other accelerators and the types of programs that we do over here at NewBoCo, I would say we've seen a really strong partnership with the type of programming that venture school has to offer. I think traditionally accelerators to be defined as a time-boxed experience, they typically have a start date and an end date for some formal, intense programming. Iowa Startup Accelerator got started in 2014. We had a $1.75 million fund that was intended to invest $20,000 for an equity stake in businesses. The plan for us was to invest in 10 companies a year for 5 years. So that would deploy about $1 million in capital over that first 5 years. The additional money was set aside for some follow-on funding. 2014, we took 10 companies. They were from around the world. And then just fast forward to last year, we took 6 companies. 100% of them were from Iowa. So it's just interesting looking at the models that exist. Our accelerator, as well as GAI, Mike, the GIA, and also the Ag Accelerator that you guys are starting. I don't know if the Ag Accelerator will also be part of GAN, but we're part of a network called the Global Accelerator Network. So as people are out there looking to see if their business fits within an accelerator, I think there's definitely a lot of good local Iowa folks that are familiar with the process and can help guide anybody that's interested in exploring it. I think the reality is that it's not a fit for a lot of companies. Some of the reasons are, from our perspective, you're looking at a company that is not only, working, close, if not having product market fit, which is hopefully something that they get really close to in venture school, but also something that has high growth potential. When we look at that investment that we're putting in to get an equity stake, the upside for the investor really needs to be significant. So it's some of the challenges that people have on, even considering giving up equity, but understanding what the value is of a program like an accelerator. To maybe dig a little bit deeper, the structured program that they would see in a program like the Student Accelerator or Venture School, you're looking at a lot of that same structured educational programming inside of an accelerator like ISA. And then also that extensive mentor network. So I think Venture School, Student Accelerator connect people with mentors. Our program, at this point, it's over 165 mentors, very deep domain knowledge in a lot of different areas. It's not just Iowa. It's, at this point, the mentor networks that I think some of the programs in Iowa have are global. So going back to that affiliation association with GAN, that kind of taps you into a mentor network that is, with a lot of different programs. I think today there are 82 accelerators that are part of GAN. So I can certainly talk for hours on the subject, but Greg told me that I had 5 minutes. So I would, hopefully I've come in under so I can give some of my time to my colleague. If we get some time for Q&A, would love to maybe answer any questions, Greg or anybody else that you think should be covered in this segment.
Okay. Julie, you're there?
All right. Yes. Can you all hear and see me?
Yes.
All right. Great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, I think, and let me know if you all are seeing it.
Not yet.
Nothing so far, Julie.
Nothing so far. Okay, let's see here. All right.
Should be a tab at the top.
Yeah, let's
Or at the
just,
bottom. I'm sorry. Share screen.
yeah, it's showing that. Let's see. Try it again here. How's that?
Nope.
No.
Still you.
You push shared screen at the very bottom of your screen, right?
Yeah, I did, and it's showing that I've done it, but it's I'm just going to go ahead then, and I'll talk through what we have to share here. All right. So, here. All right. So the EDC is the Entrepreneurial Development Center, and it is a community-funded nonprofit business accelerator. So that means that we are funded by the community, government, cities, municipalities, even the state of Iowa, and private individuals as well as private companies who funded us. This program was started about 15 years ago. By Kurt Nelson, who was and is a successful entrepreneur himself, who had exited his last company, the Crystal Group, to start the EDC. The EDC was started by the community for the sole purpose of stimulating Iowa's economic expansion of the businesses that we are funded to support. We are funded to support Iowa-based businesses that plan to or are doing interstate commerce, so business beyond the state of Iowa, and who are or have the capacity to scale past $10 million. If they don't fit that criteria, then we typically refer them on to other organizations for support. We focused on and we support startups, pre-revenue startups, and sometimes they can be pre-revenue for multiple years, especially if they're in the medical, healthcare, or medtech. Early stage, about a third of the entrepreneurs that we support are early stage, and about a third are later stage revenue. We are again, a nonprofit accelerator. We do not invest directly in the entrepreneurs that we support. We are think of us as a small, multifunctional, cross-functional consulting team that is here to provide the support as needed on the long journey of scaling. And so we are hands-on with the entrepreneurs that we support from the moment they come in the door with us until they decide they need support. So we are continuing to support entrepreneurs now that we've been working with for 15 years. And that journey takes a lot of twists and turns and goes through a lot of stages of growth. Over the time that we've been operating, we serve about, or hands-on in-depth, about 45 entrepreneurs at any given time. We've supported over 900 since our inception. Our staff is a team of 6 full-time members. We have staff. Kurt Nelson started the EDC, as I mentioned. Myself, who focuses mostly on growth, strategies, market fit, and go-to-market launch plans. We've got Jane Burrows, who focuses operationally and as a funding support lead. To make sure, for example, when people do go to John's team at VentureNet, they are prepared to do well. Christy Remley, Event Research Director, and also Stacy Paoli, who has background in all things office management, including QuickBooks setup, HR, etc. And then when we think about the types of entrepreneurs that we support, they're really across all industries and sectors, from the very low-tech consumer products or services to very high-tech. It could be new pharmaceutical therapies, medtech devices. We've got software, e-commerce businesses, apps. So it really runs the gamut over time. For the entrepreneurs that we support, we've developed a methodology over time for helping an entrepreneur assess their business and assess themselves as a leader, develop some strategies and plans for growth, and then help them over time as they're on that growth path to keep those growth plans relevant, updated, adjusted as needed, and make sure as they're focusing for growth that we provide that hands-on support that they need. Over time, we measure as defined by the National Business Incubator Association. We measure our involvement in economic development by the capital raised and employees by these organizations. So our success we measure by the success of the entrepreneurs that we support. Our hands-on support is only helpful if it's helping them achieve and scale that growth. Over time, we've had about $2.09 billion in economic development impact for those entrepreneurs, and we're really proud of that. You can find out more about the EDC at edcinc.org. That's our website. You can find out more about how we support entrepreneurs, about our team. And I would also want to tell you about a couple of things that you might want to consider involvement with. One is definitely the Innovation Expo every year. This is the largest showcase of Iowa-based entrepreneurs fitting that model that I described in the state. So last year we had over 70 Iowa-based entrepreneurs exhibiting at that expo. It also includes a day of pitch competitions, as well as pitching in front of actual investor panels. So that's a really great day. This year's Innovation Expo is on Tuesday, September 19th. So make sure to put your calendars down on that. You can also find that on the EDC website. We also support our entrepreneurs through, beyond our team, through access to subject matter experts. We think it's really important when entrepreneurs get connected with experts or mentors that they're the right folks with the right background and expertise. So we've developed that over time, and we're really proud of that subject matter expertise and mentor network. And we also have some founders groups where we facilitate bringing together founders with other founders in similar situations and sectors, and that has been very helpful for founders we support as well. So we're here to help. We're funded by the state. We do provide support to entrepreneurs around the state. And we've supported a lot that have come out of Venture School. The Venture School and the UI JPEG program has been great for the state of Iowa. So we are very happy to support any entrepreneurs. If you have any questions, just contact us, check us out online, and give us a call, and we'll be happy to talk further.
Great, thanks, Julie.
That is it.
Great summary. Mike, bring us home.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Mike Colwell. I work for the Greater Des Moines Partnership, which is a regional economic development group. I run something called Square One, which is the entrepreneurial programs of the partnership. It's been around since 2007. It's direct mentoring, consulting, counseling for startups. We're also a nonprofit. Don't charge for what we do. So it's basically a service provided by the partnership. The partnership's funded by basically the businesses in central Iowa. So we're 95% private funding. We have a little bit of city and state funding. And then from time and again, we've received some grants from the state of Iowa. And we always appreciate those. The programs of Square One include the direct mentoring for those who want it. We do a lot of business model, financial model work. We have an in-house accelerator at Square One for people that have gotten some traction or looking to get to critical mass. I would call it an on-demand accelerator. We don't run a set class schedule. Each company can apply to join, and they usually stay from 3 months all the way through a year under defined goals for that company. Do a lot of work around raising capital. Myself and Tej Dawan also run Plains Angels in central Iowa, which is a decent-sized angel investor network that does early stage seed investing. Also am involved with a couple of accelerators. I know the topic of accelerator is part of this. So along with the Square One accelerator, there are two corporate-owned, industry-owned accelerators in the Des Moines metro area. One is the Global Insurance Accelerator, which has just finished its third class. It services the insurance industry. It's targeting startups that are bringing new technology, new solutions, new product to the insurance industry. It's not meant to start another insurance company per se. And that has, like I said, it's just finished the third class. And that is a traditional incubator accelerator under the Techstars model of providing $40,000 of equity capital for 6% of the equity of the company. I will tell you that the value of that program is the mentors. David talked about his program, the number of mentors, very similar in GIA. I think we're at 180 on mentors. 180 mentors from about 120 from the insurance industry. And most people who've been involved with accelerators will tell you the value of an accelerator is not the funding, it's not the location, it's the mentors. So you really want to find the program that has the mentors you need. We are launching an agritech accelerator. We actually have a press conference next week to announce our first class, and our executive director we've just hired. That class starts on July 19. There may be room for one more company yet this year. I'm not exactly sure yet if we filled the last slot or not, but very much modeled similar to the Global Insurance Accelerator. There are a few minor differences that would be interesting to somebody, I guess, who was getting into it in a deep way. But again, $40K for 6% equity. The Agritech Accelerator is not focused on biotech. It's focused on non-biotech ag product and services going to market that, again, are scalable, just like David talked about, scalable companies serving at least the United States, if not the world. We accept applicants from all over the world. I think the GIA has had class members from 6 countries outside the United States. I know we have applicants coming through for the Agritech Accelerator also from around the world. So here in Des Moines, there are a lot of different entrepreneurial support organizations available. Square One is just one of them. We have a very strong one in the Incubators environment, which is where a lot of people get started out. We certainly have venture schools, since right downtown we have the Papa John Center. It's an ongoing program that we love. We work with a lot of people coming out of venture school. We run some annual events. The Accelerate DSM is an annual event that we run. It's a one-day event focused on growing your business. We run a raising capital seminar twice a year on what it takes to get ready for equity capital. I bring these up because all of these are available. The full video content, the slide decks, everything are sitting out at square1dsm.com. So if you weren't able to get to it, or you're not nearby, we've delivered all the content on the video environment, on the website. Please take advantage of it. There's no cost for any of that. And for those of you other service providers, if you ever want to use any of that content, just let us know. Greg, does that wrap up what you want?
Wow, that's great. That is awesome. Any of our participants have any questions? David, if I could ask you just one quick thing, if you could unmute for just a second. So you have some programming that is part of NewBoco as well. Could you just give us 30 seconds or so on the type of programming outside of the on-premise?
Yeah, describe NewBoco in 30 seconds.
Okay.
No, I'm going to do my best, though, and I'll let others that are familiar with the organization grade me on it. But, the NewBoco is a nonprofit. Its mission is to accelerate world-changing ideas from Iowa. We have a K-12 STEM program. So this summer, we've got summer camps for kids every Saturday. We have free camps to help kids learn how to code. We've got Delta V, which is an adult code school. So anybody looking to actually learn how to code and potentially transfer from one career into another, that's currently in session here in Cedar Rapids. Definitely something that we plan on taking statewide. We've got an in-house software development company. So any startup that is looking to get software created, we've got the ability to do that in-house. Vault Co-working is part of our organization. So get about 60 or so entrepreneurs that are based inside the same building. We also have Vault Labs. That's a prototyping lab. So giving people the ability to actually prototype a physical product is something that we can do here. And then agile is probably agile and just corporate innovation are two things that are really getting developed now. Eric and I have been working on that stuff since we started working together in 2014, but really ramping that up. We just hired a director of innovation. So organization literally has gone from just me and Eric in 2014 to a staff of 18 today, which is just insane growth. But there's just, I think maybe one of the things that NewBoco and, I think, certainly Des Moines Partnership and the work that Mike's doing and EDC, I mean, we're all kind of working to really identify there's so much work that needs to be done to have a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem. And there's definitely plenty of work for us all to do. But NewBoco is certainly trying to fill as many gaps as we possibly can. That's probably the most concise that I can describe, and hopefully I didn't lose too many people. But it is, it's rapidly growing. There's just tons of opportunity to develop. But, I often describe it as, just trying to give the entrepreneur the best possible chance to succeed here in Iowa, and looking at the different ways that we need to do that. So, foundational educational programs just to build a business, but then also making sure that the technical talent and just the talent in general that they're going to need to actually grow here is something that we're heavily invested in.
Great, thanks, David. So I'll just close real quickly by saying that it is incredible how much growth there's been in the support and advocacy of entrepreneur and innovation here in the state. In the last 15 to 20 years, there has been a whole ecosystem that has built up around entrepreneurs, and been very happy that we've had the opportunity to hear from multiple aspects of that. This panel on this one has been especially great. So we appreciate you taking time out of your day. Just one little note, this is being recorded, and it will be made available and marketed through the JPEC website. So it's hard to get people to find a time where they can listen in person, but the comments here will be retained and used many times over. So thank you all. Appreciate your participation, and look forward to doing this again sometime. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Tom. Bye.